My name is Rachel Martinez. I'm 26 years old, and I'm about to tell you the story of how my entire family betrayed me at my father's funeral, and how I made them all pay for it in the most devastating way possible. If you think you've heard family drama before, trust me, you haven't heard anything like this. Before I start, I need you to understand something about my relationship with my dad. He was my hero, my best friend, my everything. After my mom died in a car accident when I was 12, it was just me, my dad Roberto, and my two younger siblings, my brother Miguel, who's 23, and my sister Sophia, who's 21. Dad worked two jobs to keep us in our family home in East LA, the same house where my grandparents had lived, where my mom had grown up, where every single one of my childhood memories was made. When I turned 18, I got a partial scholarship to UCLA, but it wasn't enough to cover everything. You know what my dad did? He took out a second mortgage on our house, our family home that had been paid off for decades, just so I could get my degree and become the first person in our family to go to college. He never told me about the mortgage until years later, never made me feel guilty about it, just quietly sacrificed everything so I could have a better life. I graduated with a degree in accounting, got a good job at a firm downtown, and the first thing I did was start sending money home every month to help with that mortgage. I was so proud that I could finally help my dad the way he'd helped me. We had a plan. I was going to pay off the mortgage, and eventually, when Dad was ready to retire, he'd move in with me and my future family, and we'd take care of him the way he'd taken care of all of us. But life had other plans. 3 years ago, when I was 23, Dad started dating Elena. She was 38, had been married twice before, had two kids from previous relationships, and honestly, she seemed nice enough at first. Dad was lonely. It had been over 10 years since Mom died, and I wanted him to be happy. Elena was attentive. She cooked for him. She seemed to genuinely care about him, and most importantly, she made him smile again. The red flags started small. Elena would make little comments about how cramped our family house was, how Dad deserved something more modern, how maybe it was time for him to start fresh somewhere new. She'd talk about how her ex-husbands had left her with nothing, how she'd learned to be more careful about protecting herself financially. But Dad was head over heels in love. After 18 months of dating, he proposed. I'll be honest, I had mixed feelings, but I could see how happy he was, and I thought maybe I was just being overprotective. Miguel and Sophia seemed fine with it. They liked that Elena's cooking was way better than the takeout we'd been living on for years, and her kids were actually pretty cool. The wedding was small, just family and a few close friends. Elena moved into our family house with her two kids, and suddenly our cozy 3-bedroom home felt like a circus. But Dad was glowing, and Elena seemed to be settling in well. She even started talking about our house, our family, our future together. That should have been my biggest red flag right there. About 6 months after the wedding, Dad started having chest pains. At first, he brushed it off. You know how stubborn Mexican fathers can be about going to the doctor. Elena kept insisting he get checked out, which I actually appreciated. She seemed genuinely worried about him. When the tests came back, we learned Dad had severe coronary artery disease. The doctor said he needed immediate surgery, followed by months of rest and rehabilitation. The medical bills were going to be enormous, even with insurance. I immediately offered to take a leave of absence from work to take care of him, but Elena insisted she could handle it. She'd been a nurse's aide before, she said, and she knew exactly what Dad would need. Looking back, I realized she didn't want me around because she was already planning what came next. Dad's surgery went well, but the recovery was brutal. He was weak, confused from the medications, sleeping most of the time. Elena was constantly by his side, managing his medications, talking to his doctors, handling all his paperwork. She kept saying things like, "Don't worry about anything, mi amor. I'm taking care of everything." And she was. She was taking care of everything, including making sure Dad updated his will. The first time I tried to visit after the surgery, Elena told me Dad was too weak for visitors. The second time, she said he was sleeping and couldn't be disturbed. When I called, she'd answer his phone and tell me he was too tired to talk, but that he sent his love. I started to get suspicious when Miguel mentioned that he hadn't been able to reach Dad in over a week. When I confronted Elena about it, She got defensive and said we were stressing him out with our constant calls and visits, that the doctor had recommended limiting visitors during his recovery. That's when I decided to show up unannounced. I drove to the house on a Tuesday afternoon when Elena's kids would be at school, and Elena would supposedly be taking care of Dad. I used my key, the same key I'd had since I was a teenager, and let myself in. The house felt different. Elena had been redecorating, replacing our family photos with pictures of her and her kids, moving around furniture that had been in the same spots for decades. But that wasn't what shocked me. What shocked me was finding Dad in the living room, fully dressed and coherent, signing papers at the kitchen table with Elena and a man in a suit I didn't recognize. Rachel. Dad looked surprised to see me, but happy. Mija, what are you doing here? Elena's face went white. Roberto, you need to rest. You shouldn't be up and around like this. I'm fine, Elena. I feel better today. Dad started to stand up to hug me, and that's when I saw what was on the table. Legal documents. A lot of them. What's going on here? I asked, looking from Dad to Elena to the suit guy. Oh, this is just some paperwork, Elena said quickly. Estate planning stuff. Very boring. The man in the suit looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Martinez, perhaps we should reschedule when the family has more privacy. No, Elena interrupted. Roberto wants to get this finished today. Don't you, Mia Moore? Dad looked confused, like he wasn't entirely sure what was happening. That's when I realized he was still heavily medicated and probably not in the best state of mind to be making major legal decisions. Dad, what kind of estate planning? I asked, moving closer to the table. Elena quickly gathered up the papers. Just updating beneficiaries, making sure everything is in order. In case something happens during his recovery. Something about her tone set off every alarm bell in my head. If you're watching this and you have your own story about family betrayal or someone taking advantage of a sick relative, please share it in the comments below. Sometimes just knowing we're not alone in these experiences helps more than you know. Also, if you're getting invested in this story, and trust me, it gets so much darker, please hit that like button and subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love connecting with all of you. Now back to the story, because what I discovered in those papers was just the beginning of the nightmare. After Elena hustled the lawyer out of there, claiming Dad needed to rest, I sat down with my father and had the most important conversation of my life. Dad, what was in those papers you were signing? He looked tired and confused. Elena said it was just updating some information. Making sure you kids are taken care of if something happens to me. What kind of updating? I don't know, Mija. The medications make it hard for me to concentrate. Elena handles all that stuff now. That sentence chilled me to the bone. Elena handles all that stuff now. I spent the next hour with Dad, and the more we talked, the more I realized how isolated Elena had made him. She'd convinced him that visitors were too stressful, that phone calls were exhausting, that he needed to focus on his recovery and let her handle everything else. She'd also convinced him to give her power of attorney while he recovered. When I left that day, I went straight to my laptop and started researching. I called Dad's doctor and learned that he'd been cleared for normal activities weeks ago. Elena had been lying about his restrictions. I called his bank and discovered that large amounts of money had been moved around in his accounts recently. But the most devastating discovery came when I ran a property search on our family home. Elena had convinced Dad to add her name to the deed. Our family home, the house my grandparents had owned, the house my mother had grown up in, the house Dad had taken out a second mortgage on to pay for my education, Elena was now a co-owner. I immediately called Miguel and Sophia to tell them what I discovered, but their reactions weren't what I expected. Rachel, maybe you're overreacting, Miguel said. Elena loves Dad, and they're married now. It makes sense that she'd be on the deed. She's taking care of him, Sophia added. And maybe it's good that someone else is handling his finances while he's sick. You know how stubborn Dad can be about asking for help. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own siblings were defending Elena, even after I explained everything I discovered. Guys, this woman has isolated Dad from his family, convinced him to sign legal documents while he's medicated, and added herself to the deed of our family home. How is any of that okay? You're being paranoid, Miguel said. Elena's been nothing but good to Dad. That's when I realized Elena had been working on them too. She'd been positioning herself as the caring stepmother while painting me as the overprotective, controlling oldest child who couldn't let Dad be happy. I decided I needed legal advice, so I contacted a lawyer who specialized in elder abuse. What she told me made my blood run cold. Everything you're describing fits a classic pattern, the lawyer explained. Isolation from family, gaining financial control, pushing through legal changes while the victim is medicated or confused. This is financial elder abuse, and it's more common than you think. What can I do about it? That depends. How far has it progressed? Has she changed as well yet? I didn't know, but I had a terrible feeling I was about to find out. The lawyer advised me to document everything, gather evidence of Elena's manipulation, and try to get Dad to a neutral location where we could have an honest conversation about what was happening. But Elena was smart. She'd been planning this for months, maybe even years. Every time I tried to visit, she had an excuse for why Dad couldn't see me. When I called, she'd answer and say he was resting. When I showed up unannounced, suddenly Dad had a doctor's appointment or Elena had to take him to physical therapy. 2 weeks later, I got a call that changed everything. Dad had suffered a massive heart attack at home. Elena called the ambulance, but by the time they got him to the hospital, it was too late. My father, my hero, my best friend, was gone. And I hadn't gotten to say goodbye. The funeral was scheduled for the following Saturday at St. Augustine Catholic Church, the same church where Dad and Elena had gotten married, the same church where my parents had gotten married 27 years earlier. I was devastated, but I was also suspicious. Elena seemed more concerned with funeral arrangements than with grieving, and she kept making comments about taking care of the estate and making sure Roberto's wishes were honored. The night before the funeral, I was at home going through old photo albums, trying to put together a slideshow for the service, when my phone rang. It was Elena. Rachel, I know this is a difficult time for all of us, but there are some things we need to discuss after the funeral tomorrow. What kind of things? Roberto's will. His final wishes. The house. There are going to be some changes. My heart started pounding. What do you mean, changes? You'll understand tomorrow. Roberto was very clear about what he wanted. She hung up before I could ask any more questions, leaving me with a sick feeling in my stomach and a terrible certainty that Elena's plan was finally coming to fruition. The next morning, I put on my black dress, did my hair and makeup through tears, and prepared to say goodbye to my father. But I also prepared myself for war, because I had a feeling Elena was about to show her true colors in front of our entire family and community. St. Augustine was packed. Dad had been beloved in our neighborhood. He'd coached Little League, volunteered at the church, helped neighbors with everything from car repairs to tax forms. Seeing all these people who loved him made me feel proud, but also made me realize how devastating it would be if Elena managed to steal everything he'd worked for. The service was beautiful. Father Lopez spoke about Dad's devotion to family, his generosity, his faith. Miguel gave a eulogy that had everyone crying. Sophia sang Ave Maria the way Mom used to sing it when we were kids. And Elena played the part of the grieving widow perfectly, dabbing her eyes with tissues, accepting condolences gracefully, thanking people for their kind words about her Roberto. It was all an act, and I was the only one who knew it. After the burial, we returned to the church hall for the reception. This was where families usually shared memories, looked at photo displays, and comforted each other while eating the casseroles that well-meaning church ladies always brought to funerals. But Elena had other plans. About an hour into the reception, she stood up and tapped her glass with a spoon, calling for everyone's attention. "Excuse me, everyone," she said, her voice carrying across the crowded hall. "I know this is a difficult day for all of us, but Roberto asked me to share something important with you all after the service." The room fell quiet. Everyone turned to look at Elena, expecting some heartfelt message from Dad, some final words of love for his family and community. Instead, Elena pulled out a folded document and cleared her throat. Roberto updated his will 6 months ago, and he wanted to make sure everyone understood his final wishes. My stomach dropped. This was it. This was her moment. He left the house and all of his assets to me, his wife. He felt that, as his widow, I would be best positioned to handle his estate and take care of his legacy. Murmurs started around the room. People looked confused, uncomfortable. Elena continued. He also specified that Miguel, Sophia, and Rachel would need to find alternative living arrangements, as the house will now be mine to manage as I see fit. The silence in the room was deafening. I looked around at the faces of people who had known our family for decades, people who had watched Dad struggle to raise 3 kids alone, people who knew how much that house meant to our family. And then I looked at Miguel and Sophia. They were just sitting there, saying nothing, doing nothing. My own siblings were abandoning me at our father's funeral. Elena smiled, that same sweet smile she'd been using to manipulate everyone for 3 years. I know this might come as a surprise, but Roberto was very clear about his wishes. He wanted to make sure I was taken care of, and he trusted me to handle his affairs appropriately. She looked directly at me when she said this, and I could see the triumph in her eyes. She'd won. She'd stolen my father's love, isolated him from his family, manipulated him into changing his will, and now she was throwing us out of our childhood home at his funeral in front of our entire community. But what she didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this moment. I stood up slowly, my hands steady despite the rage coursing through my veins. "Elena," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent room, "before we accept Roberto's wishes, could I please see that will?" End of part 1. Major cliffhanger tone. The look of panic that flashed across Elena's face told me everything I needed to know. She recovered quickly, but not quickly enough. "Of course, Rachel. Though I'm not sure this is the appropriate time or place. I think our father's funeral is exactly the right time and place to make sure his final wishes are honored correctly." So there I was, standing in that church hall full of people who had known my family for decades, asking Elena to show me my father's will while she looked like a deer caught in headlights. "Rachel, honey," Elena said, forcing that fake sweet voice she always used when people were watching, "I really don't think this is appropriate. We're here to celebrate Roberto's life, not discuss legal documents. Actually, Elena, I think everyone here would want to make sure Dad's final wishes are being honored correctly. Isn't that right?" I looked around the room, and I could see people nodding. Mrs. Rodriguez, who had been Dad's neighbor for 20 years, was frowning at Elena. Mr. Santos, Dad's longtime friend and co-worker, was looking suspicious. These people knew my father, they knew our family, and something about Elena's announcement wasn't sitting right with them. Elena's hands were shaking slightly as she clutched the folded document. "Fine, Rachel. But I want everyone to understand that this is what Roberto wanted." She handed me the will, and I unfolded it carefully, aware that every person in that room was watching me. The first thing I noticed was that it was printed on regular computer paper, not the official letterhead I'd expect from a lawyer's office. The second thing I noticed was the date. "Elena," I said, keeping my voice calm and clear, "this will is dated 3 weeks ago." Yes, Roberto updated it recently to reflect his current wishes. 3 weeks ago, Dad was barely conscious from his pain medications. I have medical records showing he was on morphine and OxyContin for his recovery. Are you telling me he made major legal decisions while heavily medicated? The murmur in the room got louder. People were starting to look uncomfortable, not with me, but with Elena. I continued reading, and what I found made my blood boil. According to this document, Dad had left everything to Elena: the house, his life insurance, his savings, his retirement account. Miguel, Sophia, and I were each supposed to receive $500 and a piece of jewelry. That's it. But here's the thing. I'd seen my father's real will 2 years ago when he'd updated it after Elena moved in. In that will, the house was supposed to be split between Miguel, Sophia, and me, with Elena receiving his savings and life insurance. The house was specifically meant to stay in our family. Elena, where's Dad's lawyer? Mr. Herrera handled all of Dad's legal documents for the past 15 years. Did he prepare this will? Elena's face went pale. Roberto decided to use someone new. Someone more affordable. What's the lawyer's name? I don't remember off the top of my head. That's when I knew for certain what I was looking at. This will isn't notarized, I announced to the room. In California, wills have to be notarized or witnessed by two people who aren't beneficiaries. Elena is the sole beneficiary, and there are no witness signatures. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Father Lopez stepped forward, looking grave. Elena, is this true? Roberto never mentioned changing his will to me, and he usually discussed important decisions. Elena was starting to panic. I could see sweat forming on her forehead despite the cool church air. Look, the important thing is that Roberto wanted to take care of his wife. That's what good husbands do. Elena, I said, pulling out my phone. I'm going to call Mr. Herrera right now and ask him about Dad's real will. Should I do that? Rachel, don't make this harder than it has to be. Mr. Herrera? It's Rachel Martinez, Roberto's daughter. Yes, I know. Thank you. Listen, I need to ask you about my father's will. What do you mean you haven't heard from him in months? I put the phone on speaker so everyone could hear. Rachel, your father came to see me about 8 months ago to update his will when he married Elena. He specifically wanted to make sure the family house stayed with you kids, while Elena would inherit his other assets.
He was very clear about that.
I still have the original in my office safe. The silence in that church hall was deafening. Elena made one last desperate attempt. That's an old will. Roberto changed his mind. Ma'am, Mr. Herrera's voice came through the speaker clearly. I've been practicing law for 35 years, and I've never seen a valid will written on computer paper without proper notarization. What you have there sounds like a forgery. The word forgery hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Elena grabbed her purse and bolted for the door, but she didn't get far. Ray, my cousin who's a detective and had been at the funeral, was already moving to intercept her. Elena Martinez, he said in his official police voice, we need to talk. But the bombshells weren't over yet. Mrs. Rodriguez, Dad's elderly neighbor, stood up slowly and cleared her throat. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think you all should know something. Last month, I saw Elena at Roberto's house with a man I didn't recognize. They were loading boxes into a truck while Roberto was at his doctor's appointment. When I asked Elena about it later, she said they were just donating some old clothes, but those boxes looked heavy, like they had books or papers in them. Miguel finally spoke up. What kind of boxes? The kind you'd use for documents. I remember thinking it was odd because Roberto was very organized about his paperwork. He kept everything in that old filing cabinet in his study. My heart started racing. Elena, what was in Dad's filing cabinet? I don't know what she's talking about. Elena. Ray's voice was stern now. We can do this easy way or the hard way, but you're going to answer some questions. That's when Sophia, my younger sister, did something that shocked everyone in the room. She started crying. Not sad crying, angry crying. I can't do this anymore, she sobbed. Rachel, I'm so sorry. Elena, she told us you were trying to steal Dad's money. She showed U.S. bank statements that made it look like you were taking money from his accounts for yourself. My jaw dropped. What bank statements? Miguel looked sick. She had documents showing large transfers to your account. She said you were manipulating Dad while he was sick. Those transfers were the mortgage payments I was making. I was sending Dad money every month to help pay off the second mortgage he took out for my college. The pieces were falling into place. Elena had been playing all of us against each other, showing my siblings fake or manipulated documents to make me look like the bad guy while she systematically stole everything Dad had worked for. There's more, Sophia continued, wiping her eyes. Elena offered to pay for my last semester of nursing school if I supported her version of events about the will. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. My own sister had been bought off. But Miguel's confession was even worse. She offered to co-sign a loan for my business, he admitted, not meeting my eyes. Said she'd help me get started with my own auto shop, but only if I didn't cause problems about Dad's estate. I stared at my siblings, these people I'd helped raise, people I'd sacrificed for, people I'd loved unconditionally, and realized Elena had managed to turn them against me with bribes and lies. But you know what? I wasn't angry at them anymore. I was furious at Elena. Ray, I said to my cousin, I want to press charges. Fraud, elder abuse, forgery, theft, whatever you can make stick. Elena tried one more desperate play. You can't prove anything. Roberto was confused at the end. Everyone knows that. That's when Father Lopez stepped forward with something that made Elena's face go completely white. Actually, Elena, I think I can help with that. 3 weeks ago, when you claim Roberto signed this will, he was here at the church with me. We spent 2 hours talking about his real will, the one Mr. Herrera prepared. He was very clear-minded and very specific about wanting the house to stay in his family. He also mentioned being worried about some documents Elena had been asking him to sign. He even asked me to witness his signature on a letter he wrote to his children, explaining his real wishes in case anything happened to him. Father Lopez reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. He asked me to give this to Rachel if there were ever any questions about his estate. My hands were shaking as I opened the letter, but I read it out loud so everyone could hear. My dearest children, if you're reading this, it means something has happened to me, and there are questions about my will. Please know that my final wishes haven't changed. The house belongs to you three, Rachel, Miguel, and Sofia. It's your legacy from your mother and me. Elena is a good woman and I love her, but this house is your birthright. If anyone tells you otherwise, they are lying. I trust Mr. Herrera has the real will. Please take care of each other. Love, Papa. The date on the letter was 2 weeks after the fake will Elena had shown us. Elena collapsed into a chair, all fight gone out of her. But I still wasn't done. Ray, I need you to check something. I think Elena's been stealing from Dad's accounts for months, maybe years. And I think she may have been giving him the wrong medications to keep him confused. What we discovered over the next few hours made Elena's betrayal even more sinister than I'd imagined. When the police searched Elena's things, they found documents showing she'd been slowly draining Dad's accounts, fake medical records she'd been showing the bank to justify large withdrawals, and a collection of Dad's original legal documents that she'd stolen from his filing cabinet. So while Elena sat in that church hall looking like her world had just collapsed, Ray was already on the phone coordinating with other detectives to search her house. What they found there was so much worse than any of us had imagined. The first thing they discovered was Elena's office, a spare bedroom she'd converted into what could only be described as a command center for elder abuse. She had files on my dad going back 3 years, detailed notes about his daily routines, his medications, his bank account numbers, even transcripts of phone calls she'd recorded without his knowledge. But here's the part that made me physically sick. She had similar files on 3 other elderly men. Elena wasn't just targeting my father. This was her business model. Ray called me that evening with the preliminary findings, and I had to sit down because my legs literally gave out. Rachel, we found evidence that Elena has been running this scam for at least 5 years. She targets recently widowed men with assets, marries them quickly, isolates them from their families, and then systematically drains their accounts while manipulating them into changing their wills. How many victims? I whispered. We're still investigating, but we found documents related to at least 4 other men. 2 of them died under suspicious circumstances, while Elena was married to them. I felt like I was going to throw up. Are you saying she might have killed my father? We're looking into it. We found a journal where she documented your father's medication schedule, and some of the combinations she was giving him could have caused the heart attack. We're ordering a full autopsy. The next few days were a blur of police interviews, legal meetings, and media attention. Apparently, Elena's story was bigger than just our family. She was part of a larger investigation into elder abuse scams targeting Latino families in LA. But here's what really got me. Miguel and Sofia were still defending her. Even after everything came out, even after the police found evidence of her crimes, my siblings were convinced that Elena really loved Dad and that maybe she'd just made some mistakes. That's when I realized Elena's manipulation had gone deeper than I thought. She'd spent 3 years convincing my siblings that I was the problem, that I was controlling and jealous, that I couldn't stand seeing Dad happy with someone new. So I did something that surprised everyone, including myself. I hired a private investigator. Not to investigate Elena. The police were handling that. I hired someone to investigate what Elena had been telling my siblings about me and what she'd been promising them in exchange for their loyalty. What we found was absolutely diabolical. Elena had been systematically poisoning Miguel and Sofia against me for years. She'd shown them fake bank statements, suggesting I was stealing from Dad. She'd recorded conversations between me and Dad and edited them to make it sound like I was pressuring him for money. She'd even created fake text messages that made it look like I was bad-mouthing them behind their backs. But the worst part? She'd been playing on their deepest insecurities. She told Miguel that I thought he was a failure because he didn't go to college like I did. She told Sofia that I resented having to help raise her after Mom died. She convinced them both that I saw them as burdens and that I was only nice to them because I felt obligated. None of which was true, but Elena was smart enough to know that everyone has those secret fears about what their family really thinks of them. The private investigator also discovered that Elena had been planning to kick Miguel and Sofia out of the house just like she'd planned to kick me out. She had already put deposits on apartments for both of them, telling the landlords that she was helping her stepchildren transition to independent living. When I showed Miguel and Sofia the evidence, they finally understood what had been happening. Sofia broke down crying. "Rachel, I'm so sorry. She made it seem like you hated us, like you thought we were stupid and worthless." Miguel punched a wall. "I can't believe I fell for it. I should have known you'd never steal from Dad." Here's the thing, though. I wasn't angry at them anymore. I was angry at Elena for manipulating children who had already lost both parents. Miguel and Sofia were barely adults when Dad got sick. They were easy targets for someone like Elena. But I was still hurt. And I knew that rebuilding our relationship was going to take time. The legal case against Elena moved fast once all the evidence came together. She was charged with elder abuse, fraud, forgery, identity theft, and conspiracy. The DA's office was also investigating her for possible murder in connection with her previous husband's deaths. Meanwhile, I had another problem to deal with: Elena's kids. They were 14 and 16, and they'd been living in our family home for almost 2 years. With Elena in jail and their biological fathers out of the picture, they had nowhere to go except foster care. Everyone expected me to kick them out immediately. After all, they weren't really my family, and their mother had tried to steal everything from us. But you know what? These kids were victims too. Elena had been using them as props in her manipulation scheme, but they genuinely loved my dad, and they were devastated by his death. They called him Abuelo Roberto, and he treated them like his own grandchildren. So I made a decision that surprised everyone. I let them stay. Not permanently. We worked with social services to find them placement with relatives on their father's sides. But I gave them time to grieve, to process what their mother had done, and to pack up their things without being traumatized any further. Elena's daughter, Maria, came to me crying one day. "Rachel, I didn't know what my mom was doing. We thought she really loved Roberto. She told us you guys hated us and wanted us gone. Maria, you were kids. This isn't your fault. But we lived in your house, we ate your family's food, we took your dad's attention away from you. You also made him happy. You gave him a chance to be a grandfather figure. That wasn't fake, even if your mom's motives were." The court case was a media sensation. Elena's story was covered by local news, and it sparked a wider conversation about elder abuse in immigrant communities where families often trust caregivers completely and don't question financial changes. Elena eventually pled guilty to avoid the murder charges being filed in her previous husband's deaths. She was sentenced to 15 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution to all her victims' families. But here's the part that gave me the most satisfaction: the house. Remember how Elena had added her name to the deed? Well, because she'd used fraud and undue influence to manipulate my father into making that change, the court reversed it. Not only did Miguel, Sofia, and I get the house back, but we also recovered all the money Elena had stolen from Dad's accounts, plus interest and penalties. Elena went from living in our beautiful family home to a 6x8 prison cell. But the best revenge wasn't legal, it was personal. So there I was, 6 months after my father's funeral, standing in the living room of our family home. The The home Elena had tried to steal from us. The home where Dad had raised 3 kids after losing his wife. The home that was finally, legally, officially ours again. But winning the legal battle was just the beginning. I still had some personal business to take care of. Elena was allowed one supervised visit to collect her personal belongings before being transferred to state prison. The court ordered that she could only take items that belonged to her before she married my dad: clothes, jewelry, personal photos, things like that. I could have let the court-appointed supervisor handle it alone. I could have stayed away and avoided seeing the woman who'd tried to destroy my family. Instead, I took a personal day from work and made sure I was there when Elena came to collect her things. She looked terrible. Orange jumpsuit, handcuffs, defeated expression. The woman who'd stood in that church hall 6 months earlier, confidently announcing that she'd inherited everything, was gone. This was just a broken criminal who'd finally been caught. "Hello, Elena," I said calmly as the deputy brought her inside. She couldn't even look at me. "I want you to know," I continued, "that Maria and Carlos are doing well. They're living with Carlos's aunt in Riverside. They visit us sometimes. They loved Dad, and we're not going to punish them for what you did." Elena started crying then, probably the first genuine emotion I'd ever seen from her. But I wasn't done. "I also want you to see something." I led her to Dad's study, the room where she'd spent months forging documents and planning her theft. But now it looked completely different. I'd turned it into a memorial room for Dad. His military photos were on the walls, along with pictures of him with Mom, with us kids, with his grandparents. His tools were displayed in a shadow box. His favorite books were on the shelves. There was a small altar with his picture, some candles, and fresh flowers. "This is how the room should look," I told Elena. "This is how we're going to remember him. As our father, our hero, our protector. Not as your victim." Elena broke down completely. "Rachel, I'm sorry. I know you won't believe me, but I really did love Roberto at first. It got complicated." "Complicated?" I stared at her. "You drugged my father, forged legal documents, stole his money, and tried to turn his children against each other. That's not complicated, Elena. That's evil." The deputy gave her 30 minutes to pack. I watched her gather her clothes, her cheap jewelry, her personal photos, the sad remnants of a life built on lies and theft. As she was leaving, she turned back one more time. "What are you going to do with the house?" I smiled. "We're going to live in it. Miguel's moving back in next month. He's starting his auto shop, and he wants to be close to family while he gets it off the ground. Sophia's going to stay here while she finishes nursing school. And I'm going to pay off Dad's mortgage with the restitution money you're required to pay us." Elena's face crumbled as she realized the full scope of what she'd lost. Not just the house, not just the money, but the family she could have been part of if she'd been honest from the beginning. "Elena," I said as the deputy prepared to take her away, "you could have had a good life with us. Dad loved you. We would have accepted you. All you had to do was not try to steal everything we cared about." That was the last time I ever saw Elena Martinez. 3 months later, Miguel moved back into his childhood bedroom, the same room he'd shared with Dad when he was little. Sophia set up a study area in the living room for her nursing school homework. And I moved into Dad's room, the room where he'd dreamed of watching his grandchildren grow up. We started having Sunday dinners again, just the 3 of us at first, then with Sophia's boyfriend, then with Miguel's girlfriend, then with Maria and Carlos when they came to visit. The house filled with laughter again, with family arguments about whose turn it was to take out the trash, with the sounds of people who belonged together. But the best part wasn't revenge or justice or getting our house back. The best part was what happened on a Tuesday evening in November, almost a year after Dad's funeral. I was in the kitchen making dinner when Sophia came running in from school, practically bouncing with excitement. "Rachel, I got my acceptance letter. I'm going to be a registered nurse." Miguel came in from the garage, covered in motor oil but grinning. "And I got my first big contract. Mrs. Chen from down the street wants me to restore her husband's classic Camaro." We were all hugging and celebrating when Miguel suddenly got quiet. "You know what Dad would say if he was here?"
"What?"
Sophia asked. "He'd say we turned out okay despite everything that happened. He'd say Elena didn't break us." Sophia wiped her eyes. He'd be proud that we stuck together. He'd be proud that Rachel never gave up on us, Miguel added, looking at me seriously. Even when we didn't deserve it. I started crying then because I realized something important. Elena had taken a lot from our family, but she hadn't taken the most important thing. She hadn't taken our love for each other. Sure, she'd damaged it, manipulated it, tried to use it against us. But love is stronger than manipulation. Family is stronger than greed. And truth is stronger than lies. 2 years later, Miguel's auto shop is thriving. Sophia graduated nursing school and works at the same hospital where Dad had his heart surgery. And I got promoted to senior accountant at my firm. We still live in the family house, and we've made it beautiful again. We replaced all the furniture Elena had changed, repainted the walls in colors Mom would have loved, and planted a garden in the backyard where Dad used to teach us how to grow tomatoes. Elena is still in prison, serving her 15-year sentence. She'll be eligible for parole in 8 years, when she's 54 years old. She'll have no house, no family, no money, and a criminal record that will follow her forever. Sometimes I wonder if she thinks about what she threw away. Sometimes I wonder if she realizes that she could have had a real family if she'd just been honest. But mostly, I don't think about Elena at all anymore. I think about Dad and how proud he'd be that his kids fought for each other and won. I think about the mortgage that will be paid off next year, making the house completely ours for the first time since Dad took out that second mortgage for my education. I think about the future, Miguel talking about wanting kids someday, Sophia planning to specialize in cardiac nursing to help people like Dad, me finally ready to start dating again after taking 2 years to heal from this trauma. Elena thought she was stealing our legacy when she tried to take our house. But she was wrong. Our legacy isn't a building or a bank account or a piece of property. Our legacy is that we're Martinez kids, raised by a man who taught us to fight for what's right, to protect each other, and to never give up on family. Elena couldn't steal that no matter how hard she tried. And that's the real revenge. Not that she lost everything, but that we kept what mattered most.
So that's my story, guys.
The story of how my stepmother tried to steal everything from my family at my father's funeral, and how we fought back and won. If you're dealing with a toxic family member, if someone is trying to manipulate you or the people you love, if you're in a situation where you have to choose between keeping the peace and standing up for what's right, I hope my story shows you that it's worth fighting for the truth. Hit that like button if this story resonated with you. Subscribe for more content like this, and let me know in the comments. Have you ever had to fight for your family? What would you have done in my situation? Remember, you're stronger than you think. Family is worth fighting for, and the truth always wins in the end. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.